Did you know that as we get older, women are more likely to enjoy being single than men? Men are usually the ones, after they lose their spouse, whether, they passed away or through divorce, they're more likely to remarry than women are. And there's a reason for that. I'm going to talk about that. But overall, from just my own personal observation and what I'm reading, it just makes sense that women are enjoying a new chapter in their lives. A lot of people will throw the insult at them, or they what they consider an insult, saying, you're going to end up being a crazy cat lady with a box of wine in the fridge. Well, trust me, this isn't an insult to women. A lot of women are like, wow, that sounds really nice. I don't have to take care of anybody and wash their dirty underwear and have to worry about their schedule. I just worry about myself, my needs, and I get all these cute little cats to cuddle up with and a box of wine in the fridge. How is that an insult?
I wake up in the morning with a smile on my face, feeling thankful for the love and the happiness we chase. Sun is shining brightly, sky so blue and clear. With every
I'm curious. If you were to guess, who would you say would be happier being single, between men and women as we get older? Let's say 50 and above. Would you think men would be happier being single, or would you guess women? Well, if you guess women, you're right. According to, the research that I'm reading, and I'll give you the breakdown as to why they suggest that women are happier. Now, keep in mind, isn't everybody, this is just what this research happens to show. And I agree with it. I think it's true just from my own personal observation. Women tend to experience more of the marital strain as far as being the caregiver. They're the ones that raise the kids. They take care. They have more responsibilities around the house as far as chores. Again, this isn't everybody. This is just from what I've seen. The majority in my age group and older. That's the way we were raised. The younger generation, they seem to split things. It doesn't seem like it's the woman's chore like it used to be, and as earning money doesn't just fall on the men anymore. They tend to be equal partners. But in my generation and older, it was kind of, the guy went off to work, he brought in the paycheck, the woman stayed home, they raised the kids, they took care of the house. And then as they get older, and they retire, now the man gets to stay home. He doesn't, have to go out. He's bringing in his pension or whatever. So he actually gets to retire. Whereas the woman, she still has these responsibilities. So if they were to separate or she becomes a widow, now she's only responsible for worrying about herself. So yeah, I could see that it would be more desirable for her, right? For men, from what they're saying, and I've seen this to be true, I saw it with my own dad, my stepdad. um, Men are more dependent on their spouse emotionally and socially, not necessarily financially, but there are some cases. But they tend to rely on their spouse for the connection with the kids and their social activities, that kind of thing. And so when they become widowed or become widowers, what are men, widowers? No, women are widowers. I don't know. But when they lose their spouse or they get divorced, they tend to be more lonesome because they don't have that connection, and they're more likely to marry, especially if they were in a good marriage before that. They enjoy that, so they're more likely to remarry, whereas women usually don't. I did a video on that just a while back. You guys know, for most women, it just looks like work that we're not willing to invest in, especially if we had a good relationship. We feel like, yep, we had a good relationship. We're fine. We experienced it. It was lovely. But now we just want to focus on ourselves and, maybe our friends and our kids or whatever. We don't want to have to become a nurse to an older partner, because at this point, you might need a caregiver, and a lot of women are like, I don't want to be a nurse with the purse. I see that a lot. But I personally, I enjoy companionship. I enjoy my husband's companionship. But like I said, if something was to happen to him, to go through the process of dating and being responsible for somebody else, I wouldn't want that. If I could just date and go out and have a few laughs with somebody, that's all I really would need. But then I come home and I don't have to take care of anybody. I'm not responsible for worrying about, if somebody wants to do this or that. I just have to worry about me. I can see how that would be, desirable. Whereas, a lot of men feel like when they're single at this point in their life, they come home and there's nobody to take care of them, nobody to cook for them. Some men cook. I'm not like like I said, it's not all, but like in my father's case, he didn't cook, he didn't do housework. He wasn't the social butterfly that my mom was. So when she passed on, there was a big hole in his life. He didn't know what to do with himself. He ended up going out to eat a lot, and he was lonely. We went over there, and we would call mom and we would hang out with mom, but we never just hung out with dad, and it was just because we just didn't have that same relationship. We didn't, it's not like we didn't like him, but we didn't feel as comfortable hanging out with him as we did mom. So yeah, he found himself alone, and so he married within, I think it was a year. I could be wrong. Maybe it was a little bit longer, but he married fast. And my mom said he would. She knew that that would happen, and she told us not to be upset because she knew that he was going to need that. And I see that. I see men are more likely to want to date. When we were younger, there was more societal pressure for women to get married. You had to get married. You'd be an old maid, and you need a helpmate, and blah blah blah. Well, things have changed. Women realize they don't need to marry for financial reasons, so they can be a little bit choosier. And if they don't want to marry, they don't have to marry. But there was a time when women had to, because they just weren't able to make as much money as men. They wouldn't have been able to afford the lifestyle that they wanted, raise the family, and all that stuff. So yeah, they were more likely to marry. Now women, make as much money as men, and so it has changed things. But a lot of men don't want to get married because they don't want to be just a paycheck. So, I get both sides. I totally understand, why things are the way they are today. I wouldn't even want to be part of it, to be honest with you. But yeah, from the studies, it just shows that women are more likely to enjoy being single as they get older and not having to be a caregiver at that point, whereas men tend to be lonely. They would be more likely to go out and find another partner. What do you think? Do you agree with the study? Do you think it's totally off key? What are your thoughts? I'm just curious. Like I said, I can see that this makes sense just from my observation from most of the women that I know that are single, and I happen to know a lot of older women that are single, and not one of them is unhappy being single. You hear people joke about, oh, she's going to end up being a cat lady with the box of wine in her fridge. That doesn't sound bad. It only sounds bad to the people that are, trying to use that as, an insult. But most women are like, yeah, I wouldn't mind being a crazy cat lady. I like my cats and having a box of wine in the fridge, and I can drink whenever I want. That's not a bad thing. So, it's much more desirable to deal with that than having to put up with a partner say that you don't want to have to deal with. There could be a lot of things happening as you get older. You might need more of a caregiver or a nurse, and some people didn't bargain for that. Some women are natural nurturers and caregivers, and they don't mind, and that's part of their vows. They knew that this was going to happen. But when the roles are reversed, I've seen a lot of men that did not expect to have to be caregivers for their wives and couldn't, and ended up putting their wives in homes and moving on. I think that's more common. There have been women that have done the same thing. Like I said, these aren't absolutes. But overall, I do believe that women tend to be happier single as they get older than men would be. Men are less likely to be happy. They tend to be more lonely. So, like I said, what do you think? I'm just curious what your thoughts are. my thoughts are I would be happy being single. I would miss my husband dearly, and he does do a lot of things that I don't do. But overall, I don't I can't see that I would want to get involved, you know. I wouldn't mind having friends, but you know, you usually hear men don't want to be friends. I don't know, maybe they change as they get older, you know, if they would want to just be companions, go out to dinner, we go Dutch, you know, I like hanging out with guys. I like even my brother, he cracks me up. You know, he's got a great sense of humor. I enjoy his company, and you know, that would be all that I would need. I would just like, you know, somebody's company occasionally. And if I needed stuff done around the house, I'd hire it done, a handyman or whatever. But that's no reason to get involved in a relationship, because you need a man to do things, right? You can either figure it out yourself. We got YouTube. Women can figure out how to fix things. I've done a lot of repairs around the house myself. My daughter does too. You know, she even knows how to work on her car and change her oil and do all that stuff. You know, women just weren't taught that, you know, at one time, but now we're realizing, hey, we can do that stuff too. We can just Google it and go on YouTube, and you know, we can do the same stuff. You know, for women just don't tend to enjoy it. You know, you don't see as many women plumbers and electricians or whatever. There are some, but overall, that's just not something that we enjoy doing. But doesn't mean we're not capable of doing these things. And like I said, if you can't do it yourself, you're just gonna have to pay to have it done. But certainly don't get in a relationship for that kind of stuff. You know, that just doesn't make sense. And the same with guys. You know, if you're just looking for somebody to cook for you or whatever, learn to cook. Go out to eat. You know, or if you're the same, you need a maid or whatever. Come on. You can pick up the house a little bit, or you can have Merry Maids come in once a week. Shoot, they have all kinds of maid services now. So, you know, the reasons that people may have gotten married at one time are no longer valid reasons to, you know, get married again. You can still do those things for yourself and just enjoy somebody's companionship. You know, go out to dinner, go to a movie occasionally, and then go home and enjoy having the house to yourself, not having to, you know, worry about anybody else's schedule or what they want to eat or what they want to watch or even how you decorate your house. You can do whatever you want, you know? And when that, I don't know, I think that sounds enjoyable, especially for someone like me who was married since she was 17. You know, I went from my parents' house, you know, to being married, and I never got to experience having my own place, doing things the way I want, eating when I want, eating what I wanted, staying up as late as I want, you know, having friends over, not having to worry about, you know, oh, your husband doesn't really care for this person or that, you know what I mean? Just not that that was an issue in my relationship, but I've always heard, you know, I have friends that are like, yeah, my husband doesn't like this person, that person. So I usually don't have people over because he gets annoyed, you know. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You can have parties, you can, you know, have tea parties and girls' nights and spa nights. And I just think it sounds wonderful. Like I said, I would completely miss my husband. I hope, you know, I always say, I hope I go first. But if that happens, I would not be in a hurry to get back into another relationship. That's all I'm saying. So, anyway, I'm curious what your thoughts are. How do you guys feel about this? Would you enjoy it? Or do you think you would be in a race to get back into another relationship? Anyway, let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.